Professor Daniel Levitin, I am really excited and my brain is I loved your book, Music as Medicine. And so often I record podcasts with people asking their challenges, but we also have podcasts where we have experts on the episode. And you are our expert as a neuroscientist, a celebrated musician, and a best-selling author.
I
And
think experts have challenges too.
we do. We're humans. Well, I mean, you can tell us your challenges. Maybe the way into this is, was there a personal reason that got you interested in music? Because the beginning of the first chapter, you say science seeks to find truth in the natural world, and art seeks to find truth in the emotional world. And it seems to me, and maybe this is wrong, you've bridged your grandfather and your parents' world by doing both. And I just wondered what the personal kind of narrative around that was, if there is one.
Well, I grew up as a baby boomer, and it was a time historically in the West anyway, and by that I mean Western Europe, North America, coming out of, for me, post-Korean War, as well as post-World War II era, a time of scientific advances and science and rationality reaching a sort of peak of importance in moving the business and economic interests of societies forward. And they were artistic peaks too, not so much in what we call classical music, but certainly in jazz, the birth of what we now think of as jazz with Miles Davis, Duke Ellington, and Count Basie, the birth of rock and roll. So there was this collision, I would say, between science and art, and not to mention a great time for literature and painting and Broadway musicals and other art forms. Coming out of that, Star Trek posed this dialectic between Captain Kirk and Mr. Spock. Captain Kirk was the unbridled Lothario uh, who would punch somebody just as easily as make love to them. And Mr. Spock was the logical automaton. And for me, uh, it is just as you say, science was always an interest of mine from a very young age, from 4 or 5 years old.
Because your grandfather was a great doctor, wasn't he? That did a
He
lot of
was,
kind of groundbreaking research. And
he was a what they called in those days a röntgenologist, an X-ray radiologist. He founded the radiology department at UC San Francisco, first generation college student from
he
Ukraine.
was from an immigrant family, or he was an immigrant.
He was from Ukraine.
He was from
Yeah.
Ukraine because of the pogroms.
Yes, because of the pogroms, which were a bad program. His family came over, and he was the first one born in San Francisco, born outside of Ukraine. But the family was all Ukrainian. They would have spoken Russian in the home. And he was an inventor. He built a telescope for himself and for me,
Oh my God,
a
that's
single
extraordinary.
lens refractory telescope so that we could look at planets and see the craters of the moon when I was 4 and 5 years old. We did little experiments with magnetism and optics, and he loved music. And so he was the bridge, and I emulated him. And I wrote the book, Music as Medicine, as a way to, after all these years, I am now the age that my grandfather was when he passed away.
Gosh, that's a big milestone. Because you
And
must have thought he was so ancient then,
I never did,
didn't
actually.
you? Oh, okay.
He was not he was not like other people's grandfathers. He was young at heart. He was in good physical condition. I just remember his whiskers being really scratchy.
Oh.
He could never keep a clean shave. But all this by way of saying, coming into my 67th year, I wanted to give myself the gift of reintegrating these two things, science and music, in the best way I could. And I realized also my first book, This Is Your Brain on Music, which allowed me to have a career as a writer.
It
Uh,
opened the portal to you to a different world, didn't it? A different life.
it did. I also felt an obligation to share with anybody interested what we in science had learned in the last 10 or 15 years about music and medicine, most of which had not trickled down to the average person. And I think that's a shame.
I agree. And I'm a psychotherapist. And what we have started understanding is the value of social prescriptions. So there's research by someone called Daisy Fancourt here, who's done a lot of work on, say, choirs and the value of choirs for mental health or anxiety and drumming. And actually, my husband works with a charity called the Anna Freud, and they've done some research on even young mothers with anxiety or depression meeting together on Zoom and singing, their depression decreases by 20%. So I kind of know it in pots, but what you've given is a really in-depth narrative and a kind of much deeper understanding. And I'd love to kind of get into that, maybe with a sort of simple question, which is, how is music effective as medicine, and how is it different to prescription drugs? Or is that too simple a question?
No question is too simple. There are only simple answers, and I'm not capable of giving simple answers. I'm a professor. You ask me a
You know
question.
too much. I may not understand you, and I'll tell you if I don't.
Um, if you don't understand me, it means I don't understand what I'm talking about. Is music different than prescription drugs? Let's look at what prescription drugs do. And they're not all one thing. And so music is not all one thing either.
Yeah.
And by that, I mean some prescription drugs simply try to restore neurochemical balances that our body is no longer able to do on its own. And so in that category, I would put SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Many of our listeners will either have themselves taken or
Prozac.
know people who've
Yeah.
taken things like Prozac or Zoloft or Wellbutrin. And the basis of those is that for some reason, it could be childhood trauma, it could be a biological defect in the way chemicals are modulated and created in the brain due not to trauma, but just natural circumstances. Whatever happens,
Physiology. Yeah.
you take this pill and it's supposed to restore your balance. Another example is hormone replacement therapy.
Mm.
Some people have adrenal insufficiency. They have to take testosterone or estrogen, progesterone. Now we're seeing during menopause and the male equivalent andropause. Actually, the men's one should be called menopause, but it's not. The women's one is called menopause. And anyway, we take hormone replacement therapy to restore chemical balances that have gone awry. And so we might take music to restore a chemical balance that has gone awry. If we're depressed, if somebody cut us off in traffic and got us upset, we didn't get a good night's sleep and we're trying to motivate ourselves through an exercise workout. For all these reasons, we might use music to help get us into a different mental state. Or we might listen to music for pain relief, which is kind of like taking an opiate. And my lab was the first to show that when you listen to music you like, your brain produces its own opiates.
I mean, it was very interesting, your chapter on pain, because you talked about your own surgery and that the placebo effect is it 48% and the medication 50% or something like that.
38 and 40%.
Sorry, 38 and 40.
Yeah, a very thin margin between placebo effect and actual drugs. In fact, I went to the pharmacist the other day and I said, I've heard really good things about these new placebos. Can you sell me some?
So, I mean, to get into the kind of nitty gritty of it, are you saying that, say I have depression, or my particular kind of people are often people who are grieving. And so I have for decades talked to my clients, to people who listen to me on podcasts, to create playlists for different aspects of emotional aspects, because they come through the sensory part of your brain. They stop the neural networks, the kind of default network. They go into you emotionally. So you can choose one to be sad about your partner that's died, or you can choose one to take you back to happy memories, which may be bittersweet and you may cry as well, or to a dance playlist so that you lift your mood. Like you said, you wake up and you want to kind of lift your mood. And is the chemistry of that releasing in the same way as Prozac does?
Well, nobody knows how Prozac works, really.
No. And also there's quite a lot of arguments against it now, isn't there?
Yeah.
That whole argument that you're not making enough serotonin isn't necessarily the right argument.
Yeah, I have a friend named David Anderson at Caltech who has this wonderful TED talk called Your Brain is Not Just a Bag of Chemicals.
Yes.
And
Okay.
so he says the problem with Prozac is if your car is low on oil, you don't just open the hood and slather oil all over the engine and hope that some leaks into the oil tank.
Right.
And he said that's basically what we're doing with Prozac. And we have a very poor understanding of the mechanisms. And yes, in double-blind placebo-crossed experiments, it's not clear that it's actually doing any good. It could just be placebo effect, but placebo effects are strong, so I say just. But you get to your question. To some approximation, music is affecting your brain chemistry, but everything does. Having a conversation with you right now is affecting both our brain chemistries.
Yeah, because there's an emotional contagion. We connect. If we mirror, we kind of feel bigger. If we miss, we feel smaller. I something the hands. Our kind of window of tolerance shuts if I feel like you're not listening to me, but it expands if I feel that there's a resonance and there's a deeper connection. So we all affect
Yes,
each other.
but I mean, even more broadly, everything we does affects our brain chemistry. For me, it's 9 in the morning. I woke up 2 hours ago. Sleep affected my brain chemistry profoundly. There
Yes.
was acetylcholine production, which helped me to enter REM sleep and tag memories from the previous day so that I could access them later. There was this whole cascade of neurochemical events involving melatonin and later noradrenaline. And I'm having a cup of tea, which is affecting my brain chemistry. And if I zone out and get into the default mode, which you mentioned earlier, that's affecting my brain chemistry. If I'm lucky, it'll lower my cortisol levels. To somebody who's not a scientist or a therapist, the idea of brain chemistry is so mysterious. Oh, what if I do this and it affects my brain chemistry? Well, if you don't do something, that's going to affect your brain chemistry. Your brain chemistry is changing second to second.
And your main message, given that that is how the brain operates, is that you can find pathways through music that, for instance, can help with Parkinson's or
Yes.
Alzheimer's, or that Tracy Chapman helps with post-traumatic stress disorder.
And I think the thesis of neuroscientists in general is that, yes, there are things we can do that will create pathways to help us achieve broadly life goals or somewhat more narrowly immediate therapeutic goals. And thank you for mentioning Parkinson's, because that's really, although not the most common use of music, perhaps the easiest one to explain the science behind it. So Parkinson's is a neurodegenerative disease. The disease eats away at dopaminergic neurons, particularly in the basal ganglia, part of the motor system, and it makes it difficult for people at some point in the progression of the disease to walk. They can't make smooth, continuous movements with their feet, or for that matter, with their arms and hands. One of the things we think is going on is that timing circuits, which help your brain figure out, well, I got to put one foot in front of the other and it has to happen at a certain time, or both of my feet end up in the air at the same time. I mean, we're not thinking this consciously, but the brain in the background
Mm.
is figuring all this out. Those timing circuits go awry, and people with Parkinson's often freeze. And music, because it has its own internal tempo, if you get the tempo just right, the music has more or less the speed of somebody's walking pace. Playing music for just a few seconds has this profound effect. The brain synchronizes to that beat. Parts of the brain, whether you're a musician or not, whether you know it or not, that happens for free, as we say, automatically. It's called entrainment. You
Entrainment,
entrain
yeah.
to that beat, And then you can start moving your legs and you can start walking smoothly with the music acting as an external timer, substituting for the damage timer in the brain.
And as I understood it, once you know the piece of music that it's kind of been encoded, you can play it in your head without listening to it. And so
That's
then
right.
it becomes the hook that you can go to. And then is it that then it becomes so habitual that you don't even have to play it and you don't have to think about it? Or do you always have to think about it?
So, I mean, it's hard to know exactly what's going on because we have to rely on people with Parkinson's to explain it to us, what's going on in their heads. But what seems to be happening, and this is very young, new research, but it seems to be, yes, the person has to imagine the piece of music playing in their head, and after 3 or 4 seconds, once it gets going, they keep imagining it. And we do training programs now called rhythmic auditory stimulation therapy, where we'll play the piece of music out loud for a little bit of time over a period of a couple of weeks. And then after that, the patient can go for, say, 6 weeks just by auralizing in their own head. And then they go back for treatment and retraining.
It's incredible. And for trauma, tell me about music and trauma. Because there's a lot about dance and trauma. Is it the music or is it the movement? That's what I wonder
I
about.
was just talking to a dear friend who I've known for 40 years, and I hadn't known that she was a victim of sexual trauma in her younger years.
Oh, gosh.
And she just revealed it to me and revealed that her way of dealing with it was always through dance. She's a therapist now. And so perhaps it was because something happened to her body that was very much unwanted. She
A terrible
began,
intrusion.
yeah, a horrible intrusion of autonomy and of sanctity.
Boundaries, yeah.
But being able to dance and use her body volitionally to her own purposes, she may have discovered that as a young age without knowing why it was healing. And of course, we usually dance to music, not always.
Yeah.
If we're dancing without music, people tend to look at us weird. Now we just call it Tai Chi, and so it's all right. I always thought that somebody should set up a chai tea stand next to where people are doing Tai Chi
Yes,
and offering you
I
Tai
agree.
Chi with your Tai Chi.
They should. Yes. It would boom
Yeah, I would think so.
in the park. Yeah.
I should patent that idea.
Mm.
The thing about trauma is it can have lifetime effects. It can alter brain chemistry. It can alter brain circuitry.
And the capacity to connect is the big thing.
Absolutely, the capacity to connect with others.
And yourself. Yeah.
And it manifests in two ways. People either become hyper-connected or withdrawn. Rarely is it something in the middle, unless they've done a lot of psychotherapy. The peculiar thing is that when you've experienced trauma or depression, and I'm going to, for now, just lump them together,
Okay.
hearing music that represents that experience is more therapeutic than hearing music that is happy and joyful. Now, you might think, oh, well, if somebody's feeling down, you should play them happy music, then they'll
Lift
feel
them.
happy. But no, it doesn't work that way, because so much of depression and trauma is a feeling of being misunderstood by the world. And to have somebody come in and say, oh, you got it pretty good. You got 3 square meals. You got a roof over your head. Straighten up and fly right. Buckle up. Get off that couch. Stop ruminating. What's the matter with you? You're not grateful. You have no right to feel depressed. Your feelings get denied. They're belittled. And so the right piece of music comes on, or a beautiful dance choreography, and you connect with it and you say, oh, I'm understood now.
Ah.
And I feel heard. So much of recovery is feeling heard, which, getting back to your Prozac point, all the research I've seen shows that the combination of talk therapy and antidepressants is much more powerful than either one alone.
Hmm.
And certainly I can see that, just having a pill to take doesn't brighten everything up. You still want to be heard, and heard outside your own head. And the other thing I've learned from spending a lot of my career in psychology departments where we train clinicians, this is going to sound counterintuitive. There are all these schools of psychotherapy. There's Freudians and Jungians, and there's the Gestalt therapy of Fritz Perls, and there's Adlerian therapy and transactional analysis and cognitive behavioral therapy, and I could go on and on and on. But the research shows that the school of psychotherapy used is so much less important and less a factor in the recovery or the healing than the therapist. It's
And
not
the
the
quality
therapy.
of the relationship. Mm.
Yep. And it turns out that a therapist could use almost any technique. A good therapist can use almost any technique, and it doesn't matter what a bad therapist uses. Are they connecting with the patient or not? And it gets back in music to this old question that we musicians ask each other. Is it the singer or is it the song? What is it that's delivering the healing power? Are there some songs that are so amazing that they will fix you? Or is it really the singer, or more
Mm.
broadly, the saxophone player, the violinist,
Mm.
the pianist? Is it the musician? And I would speculate, based on some research we've done, most of it is not the piece of music, it's the person doing it.
That's really interesting. And is it the piece of music in relation to me and my story and my experience and my history? So that if I say I'm depressed and I'm looking for my playlist or I'm grieving, you couldn't tell me listen to Leonard Cohen or listen to Tracy Chapman. That's what's going to work for you. I have to be able to choose the music that in some ways affirms my experience and resonates with me, that I feel understood or I feel known.
Well, for two reasons, you have to choose the music. One is locus of control.
Agency. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to have the agency and the feeling that you are involved in your own recovery. It's not being foisted on you. It's not, you have to be an active participant. But the second reason is your musical tastes are going to change. You may have a favorite song and not want to hear it every minute of every
No,
day.
because you get bored of it. You need the familiar, unfamiliar, don't you? You need the surprise.
Yeah, and so I had a hospital procedure, and I made a playlist, and I didn't know how long I'd be in bed in a recovery. So I made a playlist of my 140 favorite songs.
Wow.
That'll get me through 6 or 8 hours of music, across several days maybe. And then I made a list of my 10 favorite songs for like right now. And that worked for a little while. And then I realized I love these songs, but they're not doing it for me anymore. It's like I love pizza so much that I'll order an extra large one at night, take home some, and have it for breakfast and lunch the next day. But for that fourth meal, after the dinner, breakfast, and lunch, I really don't want pizza again.
No, you want something entirely different.
So as much as I adore Creedence Clearwater Revival and Joni Mitchell, I can't play them all the time. And so I find myself digging deeper and creating these sort of backup playlists of stuff that's brand new to me, but I think I'll like, or stuff that I like second best, but it's interesting enough that it'll help me now. I'm in this wonderful place in my career and my life where most of my friends are songwriters.
Wow. That's
And so they're
extraordinary.
sending me stuff all the time. And among it are some amazing things, some of which will never get released.
That's incredible. What a gift.
And I'll tell you, one of them was released. And I want to share this with our listeners because I think it's such an extraordinary song.
Okay.
It doesn't mean everybody will like it. But a friend of mine named Buck Dharma, who was the one of the founders of the group Blue Oyster Cult. They had that famous song, Don't Fear the Reaper, that led to the More Cowbell sketch on Saturday Night Live,
Oh,
which is
right.
a big phenomenon here in the States. Buck sent me a demo of a song about 2 years ago and just wanted to know what I thought. And I played it over and over and over again for weeks. And I told him, I can't get it out of my head. I just love this. You got to actually record it. And he did. And then he sent it to me again. And I said, okay, well, you need to mix it properly. It's not, so then he mixed it properly and he released it in August. And it's one of the best songs I've heard in 20 years. It's called,
Seriously? Okay.
yeah, it's called The End of Every Song. And what I love about it is it exemplifies everything I love about good music in this one song. It's ambiguity. The title is The End of Every Song, but it sounds to me like the beginning of a new era in songs and a new era in political life. It's addressing the wine is drunk, the dregs remain, which is how the political world is feeling to me when I
Yeah,
look at what's
does
going
it?
on in the UK and in Europe and in
Mm.
the US,
So we're
Canada, and Mexico.
bankrupt. Mm.
That's right. But
Or on fire, whichever way around you kind of look.
yeah, but what he's done so masterfully is with lyrics that spell the end of time, he's written music that portends a bright
A
new beginning.
future. So it's hope, full of hope.
And so it works at both levels. It's just masterful.
Wow. I really want to listen to that.
It's based on a poem by Ernest Dowson.
That's really, really interesting. Thank you for that. The way that music can transcend time and take us back to Baba Black Sheep when we were kind of in the nursery, or falling in love when we were 25. You know, when big musicians die, like David Bowie, people say that, you know, he was the playlist of my 20s, and people grieve him, but they grieve the memories that his songs invoked of them at a particular phase or time of life. And that often couples have their particular song that they imbue with falling in love and being together. How does that operate in our memory? How is music and memory so linked? And is it music, memory, and medicine too?
Yes. Memory is a big part of the 3 M's then. What was your falling in love song?
That's a very good question. It was Blue Moon.
Blue moon,
Yeah.
you caught me standing alone.
We were dancing. I was 18. I've been married 45 years. So, yeah.
That's lovely.
Yeah,
Oh, you haven't
obviously.
heard it since?
Of course I have. I've heard it lots of times since.
Oh,
I was on Desert Island Disc, which is a program here, and I had
I
it
know
as
that program. Yeah.
my song on that. Yeah.
Yeah. I look forward to hearing that episode. Memory is a big part of it because of the way memory works. Since the invention of radio and recording, the two of them together, we've had this stream of officially released songs that come out in a certain time, and then we all hear them together, more or less, and they become associated with a particular time and place. Certainly, if not the first time you heard Blue Moon, one of the early times you heard it, it made an impression on you, something about that song, and then it became associated with a particular important person in your life.
Yeah.
And those memories become embedded precisely because they're punctuated in time. So other songs like Baba Black Sheep or Happy Birthday, we hear them all the time. God Bless the Queen. I mean, they're less likely to become associated in our memories with particular events, particular people, or particular times and places, as opposed to popular songs. And the way memory works is that we take in all of the circumstances of that time. So the songs that came out the summer I was 12 years old, a very impressionable time for many reasons, they instantly evoke the landscape of where I was living and the friends that I was playing with and the clothes I was wearing, and all of it comes back in a rush of vivid memories just because that's the way memory works. Memory encodes everything of a piece.
Makes sense. I remember the Beatles, and we were a family of 5, and we all had Beatles pajamas with little kind of edging on, and we had orange guitars. And one of my kind of key memories of being a child was jumping on a bed together singing Beatles songs. I mean, there are so many things I wanted to ask you about, but maybe coming towards an end is about collective music, like in concerts, and that feeling of awe and that feeling of connection that kind of, I think actually being in a church, that there's something about collective listening that transcends just listening in my kitchen, isn't there? Is that the entrainment of all of our brains together? What is that?
It's a number of things, but entrainment's one of them. My lab, along with Vinod Menon, my collaborator at Stanford, we show that when people listen to the same pieces of music, their brain waves literally synchronize.
It's
So,
incredible.
like we used to say in the 60s, we're on the same wavelength, man.
But
That,
isn't that true of meditation? That if you all breathe together, that there's a
uh-huh.
mirror neuron thing that
Yeah,
happens.
yeah.
Yeah.
Different parts of the brain, different synchrony, but yeah.
Mm.
It happens when we dance together, when we do coordinated athletic activities. We haven't studied this, but I'm certain that basketball players are having some, when things are going well,
Well, when
are
they're in
having some,
flow.
yeah, or footballers. Uh,
But what I'm getting to is that you get this out of body, like awe experience, like where
yeah.
you go to a different place that can feel spiritual if it's in a church, or actually you can feel spiritual in a concert.
Well, I can put a fancy word on this, which doesn't explain anything, but it makes me sound smart.
Okay, that's good.
And we now know that when people experience music together, it releases as a group in the same place at the same time. It releases, here's the fancy word,
Okay.
oxytocin.
Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, breastfeeding hormone.
Yeah. So it
Does it?
helps us feel bonded. And that gives us a sense of oneness, a sense of being part of something larger, a collective, not just
On our own.
isolated. It's more than that, though,
Is
because
it multiplied by the number of people?
probably we don't know. Certainly, people have experienced just being with an intimate partner, listening to music while lovemaking can create that sense of trance and that sense of awe and something larger. And I think a dyadic
The eyes
relationship,
are.
yeah, it can make you feel like there is more to the world than just the two of you, that there's more to the universe than that, maybe in the same way as being with 10,000 people in a stadium singing the same song. It is all about connection. And that sense of awe comes in part from what you mentioned earlier, the default mode network. I mentioned Vinod Menon, my colleague at Stanford. He discovered the default mode network. And jointly, we discovered the location of the switch in the brain in a region called the insula, which takes you in and out of that default mode. And there are a lot of ways to get there. Meditating is one, being in that hypnagogic or hypnopompic state between sleep and wakefulness, walking in nature, listening to music, dancing. These are experiences that put you into this mode of consciousness or semi consciousness where you're not in direct control of your thoughts. They're just sort of meandering, and that's a restorative state to be in, and one that can very easily lead to a sense of awe and wonderment and a dissolution of the ego.
In some ways, it's like it takes you away from the kind of striving, working, trying, plugging part of yourself to a part that is kind of released into just being, isn't it? That just lets,
Yeah, and this is, of
and
course, the Zen,
creative and dream and
the creative, the dreaming, the problem solving, and this, of course, is the Zen Buddhist ideal to reach this point where you feel a dissolution of the I and a sense of becoming one with everything. And I write about this in my book, Successful Aging, where I visited the Dalai Lama and witnessed one of his followers who was in severe I tell the story in the book. She was in severe distress, and she went to get counsel from him, and he spoke the right words to her, and she suddenly, from being in severe distress, started laughing. Not
Hysterical.
um, not hysterical laughter, joyful
Like
laughter,
innocent.
innocent, childlike, joyful laughter, because she realized she lost that me, and just became part of everything. His Holiness and I spoke about it after, and that is the state of bodhisattva that so many seek.
Lucky to meet him.
Oh, it was tremendous. He had read my book, The Organized Mind, and that facilitated the conversation.
Amazing.
I said to him, Your Holiness, you must know the joke. The Dalai Lama walks into a pizza shop, and they say, "May I take your order?" And he says, "Make me one with everything."
He's got a good sense of humor. He must have laughed.
There was a lot of laughter in our meeting. Yeah,
Yeah, that's so great.
innocent laughter.
So is there a dream that you have, given the kind of the power of AI in some good ways, the power of technology in some good ways, but the loss of humanity and connection and being in community? Is there a program in schools, for instance, that you would like there to be a deeper understanding about the importance of music for us human beings to stay connected, to remain connected? If we have rupture, to use music as a reconnection, to use it with pain, to use it with sleep, to use it for, shifting our mood from low to regulated. Is there a dream that you have?
There is. And before I say it, I'll just give some historic biological background. Across the entire time that we humans have been on Earth, and let's say 200,000 years, although depending on how you define Homo sapiens, 50,000 years, 200,000, these are semantic issues, but for a couple of 100,000 years, until about 500 years ago, so almost the entire time we've been on the planet, everybody made music.
Everybody participated, drummed or
They sang, whatever.
whistled. Wow. Okay.
It's
Right.
only with the establishment of concert halls in Europe 500 years ago that we created this separate class of people we called musicians.
Mm,
There was no word for musician in most of the languages spoken before that.
goodness me.
There was a single word for music and dance. Still, in most languages spoken today on Earth, same word means music and dance, because there was never a time in the history of the language or the people that you would refer to one without the other.
We're wired for it. Totally wired.
And so my dream is that everybody learn to play an instrument and to sing in school. And the second part of the dream is that we stop adopting this view that I'm not good enough to make music.
I was banned from singing at school because my voice was flat.
I was too.
No!
I was. They said, Danny,
Didn't
you
stop
just
you.
mouth the words.
That's what they said to me. But it stayed with me. I still find it hard singing because of that.
I took singing lessons when I was 50, and that fixed it.
How amazing.
It's not too late for you.
No, I was thinking that, but I was thinking, phew. So our world would be a very different world if we didn't segregate music to musicians, to dancers. We would be calmer, happier, more regulated, more connected if we included it.
Calmer, happier, maybe, certainly more in touch with our feelings and with each other.
Which is
Yeah.
what we want, right?
I think so. For common humanity, yes. Therapist.
Are you worried about AI?
Yes, because all of us want to do things we're not capable of. And so, AI is going to have, is not very good at emulating that human struggle and the human imperfection. It's trying to learn, but it's ham-fisted. It's awkward. It's at some point it'll figure it out because, I mean, here's the thought experiment.
Okay.
And this comes straight out of philosophy. Suppose I replace one brain cell out of your 80 billion brain cells. I replace it with a silicon substitute that is designed and programmed in every single way to replicate what your biological brain cell would do.
Mm-hmm.
That is, if it gets an input from another cell, it responds in exactly the same way. It does the same output. They're calibrated inputs and outputs. It's identical. Now, out of your 80 billion cells, I replace one of them. Would you notice?
I don't think so.
No. Why would you? It's function. By definition, the way I've set it up, it's functioning the way all the others are. Now, suppose that every day I replace one more. Well, it's not a lot of days. It's still not going to be the majority of your brain cells, but you'd probably still never notice. But by extension, if I replaced all of them and they operated in silicon the way that your carbon and other biological materials operate, how could you notice the difference? It seems like you wouldn't. So at some point, who knows when, somebody will figure out how to do that, or AI will figure out how to do it. But until then, save the last dance for me.
Yeah. On that point, that's a wonderful place to end. Thank you very, very much, Dr. Daniel Levitin. And tell us where we can find you. Your book, Music as Medicine, you can find it from any good bookshop. It was a bestseller here, published by Cornerstone. Is there anywhere else people can find you? You want to be found?
DanielLevitin.com.
Yeah.
I'm on Instagram, TikTok. There's a playlist for all
On
the
the
songs.
book. Yeah. I've downloaded it. Thank you very much indeed.
What a treat, Julia.
That was a real treat.